Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Thunderstock Show. I'm your host, Ross Stockdale, owner and chief marketing officer at Thunderstock Marketing. The goal of the show is to bring a valuable brainstorm to enhance your life, liberty, pursuit of property. What does that mean? Well, the things that we talk about today with Suzy, I hope that you take actionable insights, make a positive change for your life. Suzy is awesome. We've gotten to know each other a little bit over the last few weeks. She's not only survived a life-threatening outdoor excursion, but she's also no big deal, founded and grew three different businesses past eight figures, one up to what, 50 million? Yeah, just, no big deal. It is to me. She's an EOS implementer. Now she's helping people to balance their life and not just grind for financial success, but have a holistic sense of success. Suzy, without further ado, I'm not going to steal any more of your thunder. Welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm fantastic, Ross. Thanks so much for asking. Excited to be here for sure on Thunderstock.
I'm excited as well. Been excited since we had our first conversation a few weeks back. And Suzy and I were talking that I had done a podcast with someone who was the epitome of work, work all the time. The grind is what matters, that New York City mindset. Suzy, you spent some time in New York. Now you're out in Colorado. Let's talk about the opposite of that mindset a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I spent 25 years in New York, and if you've ever been to New York City, you can't help but feel the energy of New York City. It's just like it flows so fast. You have to either get in and grind or you get bumped out. And I did that for a long time without realizing that there's another way that you could be really successful in business. So yeah, for sure. Colorado is definitely a different.
Yeah, Colorado is a different world. So, what precipitated you? I want to talk about the setting, right? Because it really matters. I think your environment, people should absolutely consider that as being a key factor in what they do, how they do it. What are some of the reasons you moved from New York to Colorado?
Oh, that's a good question. So I actually was relocated during the pandemic. I took an executive role with a TV network that was really going through some deep, troublesome issues. And I came out with the best of intentions to help. And I was kind of locked in. So I said, all right, if I'm going to be locked in, I might as well do it in Colorado and make a big impact. But beautiful part of that is that when that contract ended, I met my now husband and I ended up eloping and getting married in Telluride just last year. It was so much fun. But I think when you have grinded it out in business and essentially just think that if you work harder, you work longer hours, and you put more time in than anybody else, there's this essence that you're going to be better and do better. And that's really not true. And it took me having a a severe mountain biking accident. Actually, just last year, it was just about 7 months ago, and I almost died, and it was wild. And when you come back, you realize, okay, you don't have to grind it out because I was just switching over from being an integrator in EOS, which is basically like a COO, to becoming a professional EOS implementer and working just with the leadership teams, which was amazing. But when I had my accident, I learned that I had to do things differently. I couldn't grind it out like I could before. And so I also didn't want to.
Mm.
That intention of just getting up every morning and going at it and getting on as many calls as I can and doing as much as I can and going to as many meetings as I could and networking and all this stuff. It just wasn't necessary, but that's how I knew how to grow a business. Coming from New York, you have this drive in you that will run your life if you don't learn how to listen to the body and listen to what's going on around you to make the adjustment. So now I'm working way smarter and I'm helping my business owners do the same thing so that they can get out of that business in the way of grinding and having responsibilities on them all the time. But that's a whole another side of it, right?
Yeah, let's dial into the man, you had a lot happening since the
But
pandemic, and some great, some scary. All of it ultimately helps you to expedite your process of personal development And I think one of the key things you mentioned was you had almost fallen into a habit. So it was a mental frame that in order to obtain X being your goal, you had to do Y, which was do as much as possible. But now, one of my favorite terms when I'm doing CMO with clients is how do we leverage our strengths versus just, you know, relying on force. So when I think of the idea of leverage, what I think is getting more out for the same for equal to or less than in, right? Spreading that gap. How is your calendar really concrete thing? If you're like me, probably a lot of people listening probably live and die by the calendar. But what does it look like now versus when you were in that New York hustle mindset?
It's putting more importance on giving yourself what EOS calls them clarity breaks. And clarity breaks are so important when you're at a leadership level because you shouldn't be doing. And this was something that took me a long time. I spent 12 years as an interim COO. So that means I went from business to business for short periods of time, but very intense. And I would either go in when they were having a real bad time, a real trouble, or they were growing so fast they didn't know what to do. And so those were like the two main types of companies that I would work with. And what I would notice is that the entrepreneur, the founders, were always in the work. So they
Mm,
were deep, they had their hands deep in the work. And what would happen is when you're doing like that, you can't vision, you can't work on the business because your hands are so far deep into it. And the biggest problem that I would see is that they didn't have a strong team behind them. They didn't have people that they could give things to, delegate to, like you were just saying, people that you could give something to that could do it better than you. And this was for two reasons. One was either they weren't even clear on what they needed. But surprisingly, the second thing was they didn't feel confident enough that they could call in someone to their business who was performing at a really high level that they could offer them something big. And this was the imposter syndrome, right? Comes out. We talk about this sometimes when we're a founder, is you go through the step of, and honestly, I've had three really successful ventures, but I learned more from my failed venture than anything else, which you left that one off. So I'll add that one in. I had a software company. It was
okay.
incredible. I was the visionary, which I was in the wrong seat. And I went through this personally where I couldn't understand why a great CMO would want to come into my business when I wasn't profitable yet. Not understanding that software companies aren't profitable for years, right? But you go through this and you're thinking like, I can't tell you how many times I'm fixing this on the first session day of an EOS implementation. Is the founder hired all these people because they could teach them, they could raise them, they could raise them up in the way of they would become leaders. But what they really needed was somebody who was better at them at marketing, better than them at sales, better than them at operations, better than them at finance. And when that happens, now you have a team that can rock it. This is when a visionary can back off and say, okay, I need that clarity break to see truly where the business should go.
And I had this conversation with one of the people that I lead in one of my clients, and he was pretty open and honest and vulnerable about it, which is probably a good sign of high trust. That's a good sign.
Yes.
And he goes, "I'm going to be honest. I don't know how I'm going to pull my weight like you and some of the other members are pulling your weight." And I said, first of all, you're on the leadership team. So this is your first time on the leadership team, but take it from someone who's been on quite a few. The reason you're here is because the group agrees that you have inherent value and you're an equal seat at the table. So just because you don't have the visionary experience or maybe the product development experience of some of the other members doesn't mean that your value and impact isn't of equal importance. And he was just kind of like, wow, I didn't think of it that way. And he's like, well, I don't have any doubt in my own skills and my own ability. I just have doubt around, how much impact I'll make and about this new thing that we're doing. And I said, here's the secret. Everyone that's sane, unless you're a psychopath, experiences anxiety or doubt about doing a new thing. That's why it's called doing a new thing. So that's normal. I said, but the fact that you're having this conversation with me shows me that you take it seriously and you trust me. And the intangibles, when we talk about a people analyzer being either you get it, want to have capacity. I said, you've got capacity. And what you don't have is the experience and the skills, but you have time and we have runway to develop it. So anyway, those conversations are ones that I wish I had at every organization.
And that goes exactly to, if you think about somebody who's developing a company, you have to think of where they've come from. Is somewhere along the lines they became the subject matter expert of whatever it is that the company that they're creating, right? And they know at such a deep level what the market wants. And so they start building this product or service, not knowing all the other aspects of the business. And so they go from being this expert in this one piece to not knowing what even the basics are in these other functions. And so this is where it can really wear on the confidence of your visionary or your founder to say, shoot, like I have no idea how to do marketing. Marketing is, I want to say, probably the biggest downfall of most companies is they don't understand that marketing in a whole is making people aware of what you're offering and then getting them interested, right? So they don't get that concept. It's simple to us because we're working the inner structure, but if you ask me how to build a computer, I'd have no idea where to even start, right? Well, the same thing with the engineer who knows how to build the computer, not going to have any idea where to start with marketing. So they do that the best that they can with what they have to work with, but then they're like, okay, why would Ross want to come work with me when I don't even know what's going on here, right? And it's really a mindset shift that needs to say, okay, the product that I'm offering is so great that Ross is going to love working with me because my company's going places. But that has to come with the inner confidence that most leaders don't have. And this is why we have so much talk about imposter syndrome, is that they can hide it pretty well, but internally there's so much going on in their mind that it doesn't allow them to dig deeper to say what's really going on here. And then they just try to do it all, right? So the
Yeah.
busyness kicks in.
That's such an interesting thing. It reminds me of a recent client that I had just onboarded. There's imposter syndrome. That's absolutely something that if anyone's honest, that's a dragon they have to slay always and forever, right? But this person, it goes back to our concept we talked about of the body keeping a score in terms of stress or trauma or, hard things. If you don't process them and sometimes shed them and forget it, they can rear their ugly head up in other ways down the road. This person, we had talked and done strategy. We got along great. Loved his story, loved the vision, loved everything he was building. Had the utmost confidence in this founder. And when it was like, hey, I would like to work with you, but I'm a little bit hesitant. And I uncovered, I was like, why? What's holding you up? And we didn't talk money. I didn't say my price of what it looks like to engage. And he goes, I just don't think I can afford to work with you. That's what he said. And I said, I almost like laughed, not to be rude, not to be like condescending, but I was like, that's your concern? I was like, well, let's talk about it. Where you're at the lowest pricing tier because you're pre-revenue. And I don't ever want to be the reason that a founder is not successful by overcharging for my involvement when you're using your burn rate with your funding and the money you've raised. Once you hit revenue, then typically things get more complex and down the road. So when he heard that, he just like had this huge sigh of relief. And now we've been working together. But it goes to your point of if you don't, and this applies to sales, which you have plenty of experience in, applies to leadership, it really applies to human communication. If you're worried about something, and this is anyone listening, not just Suzy or myself, you know what the best thing to do is? Say, screw it and ask. Just ask. Because oftentimes, a lot of that source of anxiety or imposter syndrome or fear, whatever you want to call it, spawns from uncommunicated and then unmet expectations. So if you communicate and you set an expectation, it like knocks the fear right out of whatever you have in mind.
So that's such a great point. But how do you get to the point of asking? I would say is covered by two things. First is recognizing that you're in busyness. And busyness does not mean you are making headway or getting traction. Like busyness is just staying busy so you don't. I call it, most of my founders, they stick their head in the sand about the finances so that they don't know what the situation is. And they just make all these problems in their head of like your guy who said, I can't afford you. You didn't even give him a price, right? What is that? That's actually, it's so real for so many people because they don't want to deal with a thing that they don't understand. So they just stick their head in the sand about it. And they're like dealing cash to cash, paycheck to paycheck, so to speak, for the business too, right? And this is kind of somewhat of an American habit of doing the paycheck to paycheck thing or the revenue to expenses thing, right?
And
So
that's such an interesting way to think about it because there's two types. There's like it's Goldilocks and the Three Bears. They have an expectation the price should be $500 a month, which is too low. You know, way too cold. You're off the mark. That's not what this is. If you want somebody else, that's best of luck. And then they think it could be $25,000 a month, and I'm like, way too high. Not what fits. But there's an interesting thing, and I don't want to promote my business or disparage other people that do what I do. To each their own. It all makes sense in the long run. But when people meet let's say there was an EOS implementer out there, I don't know who this would be, but they're in such high demand that they can't take on any more clients forever. And if they really wanted one, it's $20,000 a session day, right? That's pretty high ticket. But then if that person only ever talked to that implementer, they would think that everyone charges 20,000.
that's right.
But that's not how it works.
Not the case. Not the case at all. But this again goes back to being too busy to actually figure out what things are important. And so when I moved, most of my career was in sales before I did COO work. And when I made that switch, I had to switch the sales. If you've ever sat in a sales seat, you also learn to drive numbers, right? More contacts equals more sales, right?
Yeah.
So if
Sales
you
and math are closely related.
that's right. So if you've sat in that and you say, okay, this is the way to do that, and then you move into a leadership team seat, it's hard to make that shift from doing to being. And the being means you have to look top down and say, what does the business need direction on? What does the business need the team member on that's missing? What does the business need to define the priorities that are most important for that function? And that is the shift that when you're in the busyness, you cannot see. So if you want to take yourself out of driving and just, every day going as hard as you can, then you really have to shift into a leadership position of looking top down and saying, what does the company need and who do I need in order to fill those seats to do the thing at the highest level. And when you put the right people in the right seats, now you have rocket fuel on where you can go because it's not you. Even if I was the best at it, if I'm the one doing it, I only have 100% of my time. And that's as far as I can go. Even if I did 22 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's as far as I could go. It's not going to go any further than me. So the key is to get the right people in the right seats so that you could take that vision and make it happen.
When it comes to sales leadership, Suzy, one thing that I've found time and time again is that top individual producers get promoted, then they get promoted to the sales leadership team, and they're so used to doing the things that made them the top individual producer. And what you just said is hits the nail on the head, where they think that they need to hit their numbers and grind, and more. But what they don't realize is their team's success is the reflection of their success, not their success as a reflection of their success.
Oh my gosh, you just made my stomach drop because this is the biggest problem I would go in and fix as an interim COO. I would come in because they promoted their top salesperson into management or leadership. And you do two things happen. First of all, if you have a top salesperson, typically their skills are in sales. When you put them in a management and a leadership position, you want to pick somebody who has management and leadership skills. And a top salesperson typically doesn't have those skills yet. So you either have to teach them, train them, mentor them, and grow them into that leadership position. But I found two things is one, the top salesperson didn't want a management or leadership position. They just thought that's where they should go because they were getting these great results. But two, now you create this world of problems. You have one, you take your top salesperson out of production. This is the Achilles heel of every company. You take your top salesperson out of production. Now your revenue drops, and now they're trying to lead a team where they were just competing against each other, right? So now this person with no leadership ability, no management skills, tries to manage the rest of the team the way that they did it, and it doesn't work. So now they blow up the rest of the sales team. And guess what? You just went from having your best months with your best people to taking the whole team out. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not really. So then you have to rebuild the sales team. And what does that do to revenue? Revenue goes on a roller coaster downhill until you rebuild. And that can take months, if not a year. And that can cripple companies, if not take them out. And so I would highly, highly recommend to leaders, if you're even thinking about taking your top salesperson and making them a leader, they have to beg, plead, and want that position because they are ready to lead and come off the sales floor. So that's a big differentiator that will sometimes save companies if they take that into consideration.
You know, I just had this conversation at home. It's so funny you say this. My wife is a sales consultant, so she has been doing sales for just about her whole career. And I think every year she's been in sales, she was in the president's club of the company. And as long as we've been together, she's been in this one firm, and probably for the last 3 years, they're like, "All right, so you're ready for management?" And she goes, "Nope." Every year around time for promotions, and she just had this conversation with not even the manager of her location, but like the regional, the VP of the firm directly spoke to her. It's like, all right, so have you reconsidered leadership? And she goes, not happening. And I think, and I'm glad that I mean, love her to death, it's my wife, but I'm glad that she says that she's so firm in that stance. Not that I don't believe that she would be great at leadership, but I believe that she doesn't want it because of its conflict with her life goals, which would be, she identified that if I keep being on the President's Club as a producer, I can have more flexibility with my schedule, time with my family. Like, I appreciate that selfishly very much. But she goes, why would I want to take a step back in overall quality of life for a position that I'm already the best at? Anyway, I want to share that with you because
That's so good for her because she recognizes that this is where she is skilled, experienced, a top producer, and this is what she wants to do, right? But if a salesperson was not that aware, they would think naturally, oh, this is a bump up. This is a step up in, personal development. But is it good for them? And they don't think about these things. They're just like, yeah, now I get to run the team. But one of the first things we teach in our session days is a concept called LMA, Leadership, Management, and Accountability. And LMA, for the most part, when you're leading, you're keeping the team connected to the vision. You're keeping them in alignment to where the team should go in efforts to support the vision. Management means you're telling them and teaching them what to do, and holding them accountable means that they have someone to hold them to what they say they're going to do to what they actually produce. And this is a concept that is so foreign to salespeople who are out there just grinding to get more deals done that it's a real switch in psychology and mindset of how they're going to run each day. That accountability is really hard for sales leaders if they have not made the shift in their mind that they do want to mentor, train, and coach the sales team.
So I want to dive in a little bit deeper on leadership and management and LMA, but specifically around the stories you have around the different companies you've grown from startup to 8+ figures a year in revenue. You've worked in a lot of industries and you lived several lives in your, you know,
I have.
what are some of the things that you have that have been tried and true commonalities between the vast array of industries and the 3 times that you've successfully grown these companies? Like, what's in common with that? Because it's not by accident.
No, it was a love for what I was doing, I would say is the commonality. The three successful businesses that I had were primarily in the real estate industry. And what I can tell you is that when you combine what you're great at with what fulfills you, and what fulfills me is making an impact, right? So one of my first companies was a foreclosure counseling service I opened in 2006. So everybody thought I was crazy, like foreclosures, no one's in foreclosures. But I had my hand on the pulse of the market, and I was like, this is coming and this is going to be
Yeah,
huge. And
great timing.
it was a person that I was having a conversation with who was over leveraging everything they had to buy a house at the time. And I remember saying to her, "You're crazy. Like, I'm begging you not to do this." And she went ahead and did it. And then 6 months later got diagnosed with cancer and died within 4 months, leaving her husband with this disaster. And so went into pre-foreclosure, and I couldn't help him. I didn't know how to help him. I was in real estate agency and investing at the time, and I didn't even know what to do. And so I said, if I don't know what to do as a professional, how is anyone else going to know what to do
Yeah,
with this?
exactly. Like, who knows what to do? And
Yeah,
how do I be the person who knows what to do?
that's right. And so I taught myself on the deepest level of what options people in foreclosure could have. And I started talking about it all the time. I started going literally from place to place to educate, so that when someone did face foreclosure, because there was no such thing as short sales then, like that wasn't even a term
Really?
yet. Like it was too new, right?
Yeah.
The beautiful thing about that was we gave people who were in a really bad situation the ability to exit gracefully from a situation that was probably going to be the worst time of their life. So for me, the motivation behind that was I learned and I taught myself to be the expert in that field. And then I coupled that with a motivation of helping people that drove me. Okay, so here, let's go back to drive. It drove me to work 18-hour days, 15-hour days, to the point that I hardly slept because so much. By 2008, the business grew so fast and I didn't know how to scale. I was in my 20s at the time and like my first business, and it like boomed. And I was like, help, I don't know how to grow this thing this fast. And I just kept hiring people and or legs to the business, right? So,
Layers of complexity, probably.
my gosh, so we had added a real estate agency, we added a mortgage company, we added a bankruptcy attorney. So like the company grew so fast and so wide. It was my first time that I realized, if you don't know how to scale the business, you could have the best idea and the best product or service in the world, and you will crash and fall on your face because the business structure is something completely different. And that's what I used to build. After that experience, I was like, I'm going to help people scale. I studied that and I learned how to build the business operating system myself, custom made every single company I went into. And then one day, it was my third venture. My business partner came down. We had just started the business. The business was taking off really fast. And she walked in and she put a sheet down on my desk and she said, "Hey, have you ever seen this?" And it was a vision traction organizer.
VTO.
the VTO. And I looked down at it and I was like, where did you get this? And she's like, oh, I had read some book called Traction. And that was it. I was like in. Because what I was custom building for every company would take me 6 to 12 months to do over and over again. And then with Traction, with the EOS system, I could do this in 60 to 90 days.
Right.
This made me so much better. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So we put it into our own company, and that was a blast. That was a real fun one. That one was a hedge fund. We represented hedge funds buying property when the market was high right before COVID. It was a
Holy smokes.
really fun one. But so the key here is that you can grind it out and you can get your head deep in the weeds of what you're doing, or you could pick your head up and look around and say, where do we need to take this company to make the most impact if impact is important to you? But have you even defined what's important to you? Right?
Right. What's the real? It goes back to the tool of IDS. In order to solve something, you must first identify.
You have to identify it. So, what are the things that are most important to you and to the company? And so, when you think about those things, now you have your North Star. And once you have your North Star, the key is to keep picking your head up and figuring out, are you on track for that? Or are you getting off into the weeds of something else?
Suzy, I have to ask you this. It's now it feels like I'm in this suspended. There's a lot of suspense around this question for me. What came first, the chicken or the egg? In other words, you found EOS while you were still in your entrepreneurial grind set in New York.
Yeah.
Did your path of self-implementing learning, you're obviously what people will call like a high fact finder, where when you see
Very
a
high.
issue, Traction. Now I read the whole library in like 2 weeks, Like that's what I assume happened.
Yes.
So did your understanding of the EOS framework and implementation, was that why you then were able to identify in your own life of, I can get more leverage and more holistic fulfillment out of life, thanks EOS for helping me open my eyes to this? Or did you have the pain and the stress of, I need to make a change, I'm hitting the ceiling with my own psychosomatic, limits, and then EOS just appeared? Like, what was it like for you? Because right around that time, you said pre-COVID, this was booming and this was all great with EOS. But then you moved to Colorado, you found now your husband. Like, walk me through that.
That's a great question. I wish I could say it was linear, but if you've been on an entrepreneurial path, nothing is linear, right?
This is the only thing that's constant.
And if that's constant, then that means you're growing. So as much as I study and as much as I used to be a perfectionist and have to have things perfect, you have to let that go and be able to make mistakes the whole entire way. The key is just to not give up before you have the breakthrough. And there's this meme online, and I'll have to find it and post it for you. But like, have you seen the one where the guy is like digging for gold
Yes.
and he
I love it.
stops like 1 inch before he breaks through?
I love it.
And you're like, well, don't stop. Like, that's the key, is like, no, it was a very messy, messy in the way of hitting the ceiling, crashing, breaking through, hitting the ceiling, crashing, breaking through. But that's natural for an entrepreneurial journey. And so the more comfortable you get with breaking the ceiling and hitting the ceiling, the more it's okay that you don't fear, and you can move through it in a way that keeps you in a happy, positive place. I know now when I hit the ceiling that I'm going somewhere. I've grown. And that's a much different concept of when you hit the ceiling and then you freak out and have anxiety about it. And a lot of the world they know that pain is more of a motivator than pleasure. So they'll motivate you by pain. And so they'll make you anxious about things that you might not have ever been anxious about before, right?
Look, you have both the weight loss industry and the junk food industry trying to solve the same problem, which is exploiting people's pain about their body image.
That's right. That's right. That's a
And
great
it's like,
example.
there's probably a private equity firm out there that has a junk food and a weight loss in their
Yeah.
portfolio. And they're just like, hey, compete with each other.
Yeah. And so when you asked me about how I got to Colorado, was actually a time that I hit the ceiling. I had my software company. This was the one that I had worked 6 years of. I invested hundreds of thousands of dollars of my own money in. I put my whole life into this company and I hit the ceiling so hard. I had to do something else and I had to just move away from it for a minute to get that clarity break. Now, had I taken clarity breaks, so remember the first point was being too busy. The second is taking space to actually see where you are. So those clarity breaks, had I done them all along, I could have gotten better feedback of what to fix to make that ceiling break and go to the next level. But I kept hitting my head against the ceiling. And at the time, my father was very sick. I was locked down, so I was away from everybody. And so I was going through my own personal story of trials and tribulations.
Sure.
So this opportunity came up in Boulder. Actually, it was Louisville, Colorado. And I was like, all right, everyone's locked down anyway. I might as well go out there. And I didn't want to come out here because it was like snow and I like the warm. I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, spent 10 years there.
Okay.
It's fantastic. I got stuck there on a layover and stayed for 10 years. But the key here is that when I got out here, I was able to get that break to say, okay, what do I do with this? But I had to put the whole company down like for a minute and just back up and say, okay, what am I going to do with this? And I realized that it was my own internal struggle of that imposter syndrome of not calling in the right people to help me run it. And it would have been a wildly successful business, hands down, had I gotten the right people in the right seats, it would have gone. But I wasn't there yet. I wasn't there yet. So I said, okay, I'm going to let this go. I'm going to continue on. And that was the moment when I was in this company. I was like, EOS would help this company so much. And that became my mission. I was like, all right, I'm just going to help companies over and over again put EOS in place. And that's what I did. And it was quite fun. I've seen a lot since then, but yeah. So it's a wild ride, really, really wild ride. But the key here is the clarity breaks are so important. And you feel like they're so, how do I say it, almost like non-productive. Like go for a walk, take a weekend off, sit in a room and meditate. Like whatever it takes for you to just sit and let the sand settle. Have you heard that example of like if you put sand in a glass of water?
This is how some implementers describe rocks.
Yeah,
So the
yeah.
concept, the tool from EOS of rocks, where if you have, and I don't want to steal your thunder, but
No, no,
mason jar,
please.
clear glass jar. Uh, let's say you go to the beach. Let's say there's sand, there's some seashells, pebbles, and then the most beautiful rocks. They could be large diamonds. But what happens is if you put the sand in and then you put the seashells in and like the pebbles, you have no room for the rocks, which are the most precious and most important things in this whole assortment. So if you put the rocks in first, then you can fill it in with the minutia, not the minutia, but the other stuff, the smaller stuff later.
Well, and so what are the rocks? The rocks are the most important thing, the most valuable things that you could be doing to move in alignment with your business. But if you're in it and the pebbles are pounding you because they need you right now, you don't even see the diamond. You don't see it, what's going on. So those moments to step back, take a breath, and regroup are so important. And
Susie, you're telling me it's like you're spying on me. I know you're not, but it feels like you are. I had a conversation with my wife. For those that are listening, you can't tell, but those that can see, I did get a haircut finally. That would be a major key wardrobe change from the last podcast. Thank you to my wife for telling me to do so. And then I was like, the reason I didn't get a haircut before, to be honest, I don't have time. I'm too busy. Like, what, so going to the barber and having a conversation, like I like the guy. It's a fun experience. I don't want to think about work. But we started talking about business while I'm getting a haircut. And one of the problems that I couldn't solve for the life of me last 2 weeks is what is a go-to-market strategy for one of my clients to find a vertical. Talking to my barber about business, asking him what's going great, what's not. Really, I'm just kind of working, can't turn it off, but we're having a good laugh and a good time. And he tells me about his software stack. And I go, oh. I ask him 5, 6 questions, leave the haircut feeling a lot better. That took an hour for self-care. Talk to ChatGPT, voice to chat, and I created a go-to-market business plan on my drive to get my daughter. Like, clarity break, instantly solve the problem. Would never have solved the problem if I didn't get my hair cut.
That's right. That's right. This is a perfect example of just how if you get your head out of the weeds and just give
Literally.
yourself a minute to breathe, the answers come to you. Especially when you're in alignment with what you should be doing, the answers will come to you. And that going back to the accident of what I learned from the accident is that I don't have to work so hard. I don't have to grind it out. The more fun I have and the more exciting I get about like the things that I'm doing, I magnetize the things that should come to me. And so I'll give you an example. I was talking to this fantastic recruiter last week. She's helping one of my companies find a director of marketing. Boys who talk. And so the key here is that her and I were talking, and we said, what if I said to her, I love walking, and with this accident, I lost 7 of my teeth. So I can't go out socially anymore to eat and drink. It's like, it's hard. So I said to her, what if I arranged a group to walk around Sloan's Lake in Denver? Like, would you come? And I said it would just be literally like business owners and people who want to network and just talk. And like 1 hour on a Friday, like, would you show up? And she's like, that would be amazing. She's like, I would love to get out of my office and off Zoom and literally
Yes.
move my body. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to schedule this. She already sent me 6 people that want to come. So like, this is wild. Like, this was just an idea I had because I like to walk and I have to get my exercise with all the stuff that I'm healing from. And now here it is, just boom, like that. And she sent me 6 people. I have another 4 people who want to come. And now I'm like, oh gosh, I have to like actually arrange this as an event. Now I'm making a whole event page for it. It's
That's
turned
such
out to
an
be a
awesome
fun thing.
story, Susie. There's one thing that we talked about early on in the podcast, which was getting over the mental trash of just asking. Having an idea, tons of people have ideas, but what I found in business, people that have done what you've done is they act on the idea.
Yeah.
And it could be as simple as like, would you like to go for a walk? Right? Not everyone, 99% of people can walk, right?
Yeah.
99% of people like to have fun and engage with other people. You're solving a problem that's like so humanly simple, but it makes such a profound impact. And then you look, there could be a business out of walking. Like,
That's right. That's
for the
right.
right mindset, you can make a solution for any problem, just even from walking.
That's right. And so here's the message for entrepreneurs and business owners is like, you don't have to grind, you have to be. And so if you can stop doing and start being, it's moving into that place of creation that, and you know what? My assistant's going to put the whole thing together. She's going to put a page together. She's going to organize all that. She's going to manage all the invites and all this type of stuff. And like, I get to show up and do what I love, which is digging deep. I don't like the surface level conversations. I want to go deep. And if I have an hour to walk with someone, absolutely awesome, right? This could be your clarity break. So, like, full circle, what would happen if you just gave yourself that time and space and you could breathe?
Right. Right. Everyone has to breathe. It's just some people forget to consciously breathe.
We're full of distraction today. Everything is a distraction. I can't even tell you. It's like people don't even walk to their kitchen anymore without their phone in their hand, either listening to something or looking something up, right? Like, can you put the phone down? Can you walk away? Can you get the space to really, truly be able to look down on your business and say, what does it need at this time? And then make that happen, make that the priority. That's the exciting piece. It just lights me up to watch leaders go from overwhelm to being clear and focused and winning as a team, right? Because they have the right direction. So that's my own
No,
personal take on it, at least,
no,
for
I
sure.
love that take, Susie. For you to share where those that have listened so far can reach out to you, whether they're tired of being overwhelmed, they want to pick your brain on how they can grow and scale their business like you've done successfully several times in the past, or they just want to go for a walk. Where can
Yes.
people get in contact with you?
Well, if you're an entrepreneur in Denver, we can definitely go for a walk. But anywhere else, if you're ready to scale with clarity and calm, then connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to help you build a business that doesn't run you into the ground. So that's what my motivation and my purpose is today. So thank you so much, Ross, for Thunderstock and all that you're doing to help entrepreneurs as well.
Thank you. And I had a pleasure. And everyone listening, I hope you enjoyed it as much as Suzy and I did, sharing stories, giving life perspectives. I think at the end of the day, if everyone can solve their issue of mindset of not having to grind to build a truly amazing business or life, you can still bring tons of value being yourself and breathing. Work to live, not the other way around. So take with that lesson what you may and improve your life. That's my only ask. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ross.